On paper, this device seems like a great idea. For $200, users would have an easy way to get new software. Publishers would have a cheaper option for distribution, and data backups would be as simple as printing a page. This was all possible because on paper was how this device worked. This is a Cauzin Softstrip Reader from 1985, a scanner designed to read two-dimensional barcodes printed on regular paper into a computer. With this, you could literally just hand someone a sheet of paper, and within a few seconds, they could have a new program running. It's a brilliant concept, but one you most likely never heard of. Today, I want to go over how awesome this is, what problems it solved, how it works, and why it didn't work. In the late 70s and early 80s, when home computers were a flourishing market still finding their place, it was very common to find software in magazines like this, a source code listing you were meant to type in. You weren't getting a copy of Microsoft Word through these, but you could find handy little tools and examples of how to solve different problems. It was a way of learning and sharing that helped you become more familiar with how your computer worked. A lot of these program listings were in BASIC, a language that many computers of the time used. The syntax was mostly the same between systems, which made using these programs on whatever computer you had most likely possible. The issue was with the tedious process of typing them in, because the program most likely won't work until you have it completely typed in, and it was very easy to make mistakes you wouldn't catch until after you thought you were done. And sometimes the magazines themselves may make a mistake in the code before printing it. This massively manual process made this very annoying and difficult to troubleshoot. There were other ways to accomplish this, of course. Many magazines offered programs directly on floppy disk for a fee, completely sidestepping the printing and typing problems. But this added another layer of abstraction and wasn't really in the spirit of what the viewable source code was trying to do. Being able to directly input the software from the magazine itself seemed like the most optimal way to do this. But how this could be done was another problem altogether. Let's jump in ahead a bit here. This is the Cauzin Softstrip Reader, and here is a soft strip printed in a Byte magazine. In order to read this, you just need to activate the software on the computer, place the reader on the page, and hit start. The scanner element on the reader will move across the 2D barcode and read it into the computer. The software saves the result as files on a floppy disk or hard drive, and that's the gist of it. It is a phenomenally easy system to use. I've tested this with a number of strips, and the only one fail I've had on it was a special high density one that we'll talk more about later. This product was exactly the solution that was needed to simplify reading data from paper directly into a computer, and it was easy to use while being robust. But it didn't catch on. It wasn't that it was overpriced. Its $200 price tag was between the cost of something like a dataset and a 1540 OneDrive. The software worked on an IBM PC, Apple II, or Macintosh. Definitely some bigger computers with deeper pocketed users. It uses normal RS-232 serial for interfacing, so it didn't have weird hardware requirements. I don't think we can directly pin the problem down to one thing, because whatever reason you may have in your head as to why it failed, I bet I can give you a good reason why that's not it. Because while this was most likely the best way to read software from paper, it was not the first. For a lot of this video, we're going to be looking at Byte magazine, partly because I have a complete collection of every issue, which makes it possible for me to go back and find contemporary examples of things, but also because the problem of distributing software on paper was one they were very passionate about, particularly Carl Helmers, who was Byte's first editor. Late in 1976, Byte announced a project called PaperByte, a barcode specification for publishing software in a way that computers could directly read. There was a full manual available describing how this format worked and could be read into any type of computer. There was just one small problem with PaperByte. They only had the format and the software, no reader hardware. When it comes to trying to push any new media format, you need it to work, of course, but it also needs to be accepted and supported. Byte was trying to brute force this chicken and the egg problem by making the software available and hoping a hardware product would come out to make it possible. They continued to publish source listings with PaperByte barcodes for years, and eventually their wish came true, nearly. In April 1980, HP sent them a Heads 3000 digital wand. This was a barcode reader development kit compatible with the type of barcodes that Paperbyte used. It was even advertised as being able to read software, but it wasn't able to directly interface with any computers. Actually, let's just take a look at one for ourselves. This is the Heads 3000 kit. Inside, you get the wand with a DE9 connector and some technical documentation on how to use it. It is not serial. You would have to interface with the device using hardware logic, but that's fine because it wasn't meant as a final product. In fact, Radio Shack used the Heads 3000 as the basis for the barcode reader for the TRS-80 Model 1. This was perfectly suited for the kinds of barcodes that Paperbyte used, and was the state of the art when it came to barcode digitization in small-scale computers when it came out. But even this nearly ideal product for bytes format wasn't enough to make barcode software loading widely accepted. This brings us to October 1985. After Paperbyte had stalled out, Byte printed a mysterious 2D barcode without saying anything about it. Byte later revealed this to be a Cauzin Softstrip test print and provided more details in the first issue of 1986 about it. It's worth noting at this point that Carl Helmers had left Byte and started another magazine called Barcode News, fittingly enough. Carl had been the driving factor for barcode and Paperbyte development at Byte. That test print piqued his interest and curiosity so much that he wrote in a letter which one of the current editors of Byte replied to with more details about the Cauzin Softstrip. It was announced at Comdex in November of 1985, which meant they were working with Byte on that test print before it was publicly known. Now, despite Carl Helmer's leave, there was still some interest for this concept among the producers of Byte, and in July of 1986, they started offering their software listings for sale in this Softstrip format. This might be the peak of Softstrip. I don't know how many other third-party publishers they managed to partner with, but Byte seemed like a pretty ideal match. So, when I say it was after only 2 months of these codes being available that Byte stopped offering them, you know interest in this thing was falling fast. Matter of fact, Byte never even officially published a review of it. They teased one they were working on, but it got demoted to a supplemental feature on their BBS, which I want to let the irony of that sink in. If there was any one technology that could be pointed to as causing the Softstrip not to gain market share, it was BBS's making downloading software easy. The Softstrip Reader in format stuck around for a while after that, but they stopped running ads for it in Byte after 1986. They were still working on it into 1987 when InfoWorld reviewed a software package for it, but they had a lot of caveats in their closing remarks in that. There's nothing technically wrong with the Softstrip. It just seems to have been a solution looking for a problem. Now, with all of that said, it's still a really cool solution, and it's worth getting a closer look at how you use it. Cauzin's ads in Byte were pretty much exclusively for the IBM PC, so we're going to use that for the moment to look at it. Now, I got my Softstrip Reader with a cable for the Apple IIc, but like I mentioned, it's just serial. So I need to give a huge shout out to Foztex, who gave me some schematics for their IBM cable for the Softstrip and a copy of their IBM drivers. They also advised me to not try opening it because it's plastic welded together. So we won't be looking at the internals, but half of the ads early on talk about how the rotating optical scanner inside works. So if you want to know more about that, it isn't hard to find. Back to the cables, I also found out later that there were some technical docs on archive.org that have the pinouts of all possible cables listed. So I made an IBM compatible cable and got the software for it. It works as a TSR that you just need to press Alt-R to activate. This brings up a menu that lets you read in a code whenever you want. There are basic settings for things like your COM port and where you want to save the files, but not much else. To start a scan, you just have to press R at the main menu. Before you do that though, you need to align the eye hole with the black dot above the barcode and the edge with the line at the bottom. And then it just works. I think my only complaint I have with any aspect of this device is that the cables should have been at the other end because they have to go behind the computer anyway and they just catch on the corners of the page as they wrap around. The data you get out of the Softstrip varies more than you would think. They can contain multiple files at once, kind of like a zip archive. Looking into the spec, it also has metadata encoded in a header that states what kind of files they are and what kind of systems they're for. If you try to scan an incompatible code, the driver software will know and throw an error and cancel it. There are also 3 different densities of Softstrips. They each hold different amounts of data, around 1 or 2 kilobytes, but the high density ones really seem to be pushing it. I was trying to decode every single Softstrip in every issue of Byte, and the high density one for Mozart just won't read for me. And that brings me to the biggest issue I have in this making video. Byte is all I have for demoing reading soft strips. I've been running an eBay search related to anything for Softstrip for over 4 years and have never seen any commercial software. Oh yeah, there was technically commercial software published for it. In their ads, you can see a book stand full of them. There are a few scans of them I could try printing, but I don't know if all of them are high enough resolution, and I've recently been dealing with printing a different 2D barcode system, and I really don't feel like fighting with printers for weeks again just to try and get the right DPI and scaling. The thing I find most funny about the scans of the software, though, is that they're just PDFs, and my brain has a hard time accepting that I can scroll through them and that this is the actual software, not just a manual. Now, I'll take a moment to let you know that everything you could want to do with these images of the barcodes has probably already been done. Someone even used these as their master thesis and decoded them on modern systems. And FozTech has written their own software for making new codes. On that topic though, making codes was always a feature of this device. Even when it was new, one of the programs Cauzin sold was the stripper, which allows you to print your own soft strips. Look, Cauzin had this thing for really suggestive names and subject lines in their ads. It's very annoying. Anyway, thankfully, one version of the stripper program has been preserved in a floppy image tucked away on an Apple II archive site, which is why I needed to get my printer going on my Apple II Plus and figure out how to make discs. We're going to try and print some soft strips. First, I should let you know I'm doing a little hacky workaround for this. In my last Apple II video, I showed I had 2 super serial cards and made a 9-pin cable for one, which you can now guess I'm using for the Cauzin Softstrip Reader. The thing is though, Cauzin wasn't dumb enough to think that you would have 2 serial cards in one Apple II. The cable for this machine was intended to plug into the cassette interface, but there is an exception, and it's the original cable I have for the 2C. That computer does have a second serial port, I think. I'm not sure. I think it might be something like a shared UART for the 2 ports that it has and a virtual slot mapping. I'm still not really well versed in Apple II. But for my purposes, this is perfect because the Apple IIc version of the drivers works with the 2 serial ports, and I wanted to use 2 real super serial cards for this so I can have the reader and printer connected at the same time. Except the software is too smart and somehow detects I'm not running it on a 2C and defaults to the cassette interface. And this is where I'm being slightly hacky. There were a few different versions of the Apple II drivers on the floppy image, and the one I settled on has 2 files for serial and cassette. So I just swapped the file names and bam, full serial mode on an Apple II Plus. Now we can finally use an Apple II with this by printing out our own Softstrip and then reading it back in. There's just one catch. You need a printer that is supported by the software, and the only 2 it can do this with is an Epson FX80 and, thankfully, an original image writer. The DPI capabilities of the printers would have to be specially handled by the software, so it makes total sense that there would be highly specialized support like this. But with everything here and connected, we're finally ready to print a Softstrip now. The software for this is kind of weird and confusing, but basically you configure it for the interface type you have, and then you get to pick a list of files you want to include. You can even use the drive postfix parameter if you want to print a file from another disk. We only have access to the low density barcode format with this software. The Epson could do medium density, but like I mentioned, the difference isn't that much. So let's just pick a simple file, like the hello file on the driver disk itself. It's small, so it's a good test. Note that at the top, it tells us this will all fit on one strip on one page before we start. With everything in place, we're ready to start the print. That is so satisfying to be able to make these yourself. And it's pretty advanced. If you're printing a basic program like this one feature that it has should be only storing the tokenized basic data, which will use less space than plain text. But with the code in hand, we can now do a scan on the Apple II to read it back in. It doesn't work as a TSR here, it's a full interactive program, but it still reads the data in and saves it directly to a disk. So we'll read back the hello program we just printed, and bingo. That is how you can save and read data directly from paper using a Cauzin Softstrip Reader. Now we can try something more ambitious. The stripper software was sold as a soft strip, so we could try printing the program itself. Let's relaunch the software, put in the file name, and maybe not. 25 soft strips over 4 pages. That is considerably more than the original publication, which may have had some compression and was certainly using the higher density strip variant. They did work on this problem, but the issue was down to printer quality. That 1987 InfoWorld review I mentioned before was talking about a version of the software for laser printers that upped the total capacity of one page to 65K, but still, that's 1/3 to 1/5 of what you could fit on a floppy disk for the systems this supported. And those were plummeting in price and increasing in capacity rapidly. The 3.5-inch disc had been around for 5-ish years by 1987, so even at its best, the Cauzin Softstrip wasn't really practical for data backups, and it never got the support it needed to be a software publishing platform. Cauzin did go on to develop some more enterprise versions of the device, but I think they eventually sold the business to Symbol. It's not very clear.
With the loss of funding through Kodak, and then things kind of, I guess it ultimately sell to, was it Symbol Technology?
Yeah, well, no, there's a very interesting story there.
That's from an interview by Kay Savetz of the Antic podcast with Bob Brass and Peter D'Amato from Cauzin. I'll have the whole thing linked below. They go into a lot of the origins of the device and some of what happened after the consumer side, but there wasn't much more from Cauzin itself, and the Softstrip Reader was both the first and last consumer product. It is an extremely cool device that just couldn't find its place. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video about the Cauzin Softstrip Reader and somewhat of the history of software barcode formats up to this point. It was a lot of fun to make, and yeah, I definitely just had to grab the heads after reading that article. That thing is super cool. Now I need to figure out how I can adapt it to work with my TRS-80 Model 100. But that's going to be it for today. So if you did enjoy this video, you may want to subscribe to the channel to be notified when I release more. If you want to help support the channel, you can find me on Patreon. But for now, that's it, and I will see you next time.